Hi everyone, good afternoon, and thank you for opening up this attachment and viewing this recording. This was our last online session today, March 12, 2019. Our topic today is employee engagement. So today, the goal of the session is to talk about employee engagement, which is one of our most complex and important topics. One of the things I like about this topic is that it brings together so many of the topics that we've already looked at. Feedback and coaching, onboarding, conflict management, and the others too. It seems like everything you do as supervisors is somehow connected to employee engagement in some way. That can make it really abstract. It can also make it feel really concrete. So one of the things we'll talk about today in this brief session is how employee engagement survey is only one tool for measuring employee engagement. But employee engagement really is much more than just a survey. So our session goals today are to explore what employee engagement means, both in the broader context of the U and also in your current roles in the School of Dentistry. During this part, you'll have a chance to think about how you as a supervisor get input from your direct reports that can help you figure out what conditions are the most important for them to be engaged in their work. At the end, we'll do a bit of looking ahead towards the closure of the course. As I mentioned, this is our last online session. We do have one more in-person session after this. So let's dive in to an employee engagement overview. So my question to you first is, what motivates you at work? Knowing your work makes a difference, being listened to, working with supportive colleagues, being confident about your skills, having meaningful tasks or challenges, being respected and recognized for good work, or maybe providing excellent service. Maybe some or all of these stand out to you, or maybe there's one or two that are more important to you than others. I know for me, all of these are important for me in terms of motivation at work, but especially C, working with supportive colleagues, and E, having meaningful tasks or challenges. What these all have in common is that they're all examples of the goals of engagement. The more people feel that they are being listened to or being confident, or the more they have meaningful tasks or challenges, the more they can have the opportunity to give good service, the more they'll devote time, energy, and effort at work. And this is engagement. I like to remind myself of this really broad definition of what engagement is, because it reminds me engagement is, like I said before, it's more than a survey. Survey is only one tool. You'll notice that some factors here appeal more to your commitment and dedication, like A or G, while others, like B or E, highlight things that allow you to be more effective and productive in your roles. So there are these different elements going on. How does the U define employee engagement? The U defines it as a level of employee energy and motivation supported or hindered by the work environment. You've probably seen this visual before. It's a nice representation of the two main elements, or metrics, we call them, of employee engagement that the U uses to measure employee engagement. Excuse me. The first one is commitment and dedication, which is motivation and pride for the work and organization. And the second one is effectiveness of the work environment conditions that allow individuals to be effective in their jobs and also, of course, remove barriers to productivity. So why is this all important? Well, in the big picture, it's linked with a range of important outcomes for the well-being and productivity of employees and the organization's reputation. So there's a lot going on here. As a supervisor, I think the bottom line is taking time to know what motivates your employees, what drives them to go above and beyond, as well as what you can do to help them to remove those barriers will ultimately help you sustain that engagement and also retain employees. And wouldn't that be nice if you could retain those employees that you really want to keep? As I mentioned already, it's more than a survey. A survey is one way to get input, which is a part of the engagement cycle. So do you remember the engagement cycle? There are 3 steps. I'll give you a sec to rack your brain to think. Step 1, step 2, step 3. I think you know step 1 already. Right. Step 1 is input. And again, this whole visual, I love it because it shows us it's a process. It's not just a survey. There's no stop and start. It's constantly happening with the interactions you have with your direct reports. So yeah, number 1 is input. What are the ways to get input? I'm sure you have your own ideas. Having a team meeting is a very common way to get input. A one-on-one conversation is another way. That sounds a lot like feedback and coaching. It can be informal, it can be formal. And of course, there's the engagement survey. Those are all ways to get input. Following the input, step 2 is discussion. What does discussion look like? I think the main thing to think about with discussion is those check-ins that we talked about way back in the first online session, and how useful. Also, they can be informal. They can be anytime, all the time, but those regular check-ins you're having with your direct reports and asking them, how's it going? So the final step in the process is action. An important thing to remember about taking action is that the small things count. I like to think about recognizing your employees the way they like to be recognized. So action isn't always making huge sweeping changes in your department or unit or in your schedule or whatever it is that people are bringing up, but it's also just recognizing, listening to, recognizing, and then taking the steps that are appropriate for whatever it is that's coming up. Getting honest input on what we're doing well, and what we need to do better will allow your employees to feel heard. So let's take a look at some of your college level input. So this is some college data. What you're looking at here are the results of the 2017 School of Dentistry Employee Engagement Survey. If you as a supervisor were going to tackle the engagement results here, where would you put most of your effort? There are 9% detached, 9% or 46% engaged, 21% reporting frustrated, and 23% reporting disengaged. So if you were their supervisor, or if you were going to tackle the engagement results, where would you put your effort? Into the detached, engaged, disengaged, or frustrated category? Just think for a sec. Right. I mean, it's tempting to put your energy lots of different places, but especially the disengaged, because our goal is to have engaged employees. There's a lot of work to be done here. But the question I want you to think about is, what happens when you don't address the frustrated employees? In this case, you have 21% of employees that are frustrated. Please begin with these employees. Why? Well, because when an employee has high commitment and dedication, but is in an environment that has barriers that doesn't allow them to be effective in their jobs, they'll be frustrated. But usually one of the reasons why they're frustrated is because they're high potential employees. There's a lot of motivation there. If the source of their frustration is not addressed, they typically do one of 3 things. First, they might find innovative ways around the barriers and become engaged. That's great. Second, they might get tired and leave. I'm sure you've run into this before. Or alternatively, they might lower their expectations and become disengaged. So in other words, not addressing the frustrated employees may increase the number of disengaged employees you have, and you might miss an opportunity to support them in their work. Another thing to think about is that with your disengaged or your frustrated employees is a source of their frustration may be that their input has been ignored or discounted. So soliciting feedback or conducting employee engagement does not in itself create a positive change. Following up and exploring and addressing the results does. So as a supervisor, it's your role to create that opportunity for the feedback loop, to celebrate the strengths and explore the questions that are here on the screen. Asking which issues are the most important to address given our goals and priorities, which issues will get in the way if we don't address them, and which issues are not a high priority, even if they could use improvement. Remember, any time you're getting feedback from an employee, it's not necessarily the goal to problem solve during these feedback sessions. That takes time to think about, what actions are feasible. But it's more important during these sections just to hear people out and just to think about how you can support them. So let's take a look at how the U of M measures employee engagement. So if you asked one of your direct reports how they felt towards their work, they might tell you a lot of different things about their role, their colleagues, their management, their schedule, all those important details. The U has a list of 10 research-based drivers or conditions that help create a higher level of engagement. And the drivers are here in front of you. I'm sure you've seen these before, but I'll read them off real quick. So the first is clear and promising direction, commitment to excellence, confidence in leaders, development opportunities, respect and recognition, authority and empowerment, clear expectations and feedback, collaboration, support and resources, and the last one, work structure and process. So you've no doubt seen this list before, and it could be that some of the drivers resonate with you more than others based on your day-to-day work and experiences. These drivers play a crucial role in helping a college or department create their strategic plan. You know, I'm sure, that 2019 is a survey year, so you'll be hearing about these drivers more throughout the year and as results of the survey come in. So one of the drivers is collaboration, which is defined as the cooperation and sharing of ideas that happens within and across the organization. So this is interesting. According to the most recent employee engagement survey in your college, the School of Dentistry, this is one of the top unfavorable results for staff. We know good cooperation and teamwork helps units develop better ways to get work done and react faster to changing needs. And I can imagine this driver might resonate with all of you for one reason or another, and you can imagine what this looks like in your day-to-day, both as a strength and a challenge. There may be a narrative in your head already about this topic based on your experiences, you know, what collaboration looks like or what it's always been like for you. The challenge this week is to think about how to approach this topic. You could pick another driver too. This is an example, but just how to approach this topic in a way that makes sense for you and pushes you to find something new about it. So that's really where the challenge is. So, for example, we know that cooperation in a unit is important regardless of the work, and in many departments or units, it's crucial to getting the work done. Have you reflected on how you approach collaboration in your department or unit? There are 5 questions on the slide here, and I just want you to take a minute. And you can do this. You can pause the recording here if you want to. Just take a minute to think about them and how you would answer them. So this is meant to be self-reflective. So the first one, how do I share information and keep both my group and other groups informed? And the second, how do I assign and coordinate roles to encourage collaboration? Third, how do I promote the benefits of working collaboratively with other groups? 4, this is a longer one, have I set specific team goals? How are they communicated? How do I know they're clear to everyone? How do I communicate the results expected of my team members? Are there any consequences for not meeting team objectives? And then finally, how do I ensure employees know how they should collaborate with others in the context of their day-to-day jobs? These are pretty straightforward questions, I think. I don't think many of them will look new or shocking to you, but I think the question again is, could you, in a concrete way, to yourself, reflect on how you communicate these things to your team members? All of this, again, is connected to engagement. Okay, I'm going to move on then, and again, you can always go back in the recording if you want to look at those questions some more. This is getting input from your direct report, so this is more of discussion. So we're going to look at collaboration through your direct report's eyes for a minute. And again, the activity here, the purpose is really just to think about how you as a supervisor are acting on this, kind of what it looks like for you. I want you to imagine that your School of Dentistry has announced that improving collaboration is going to be a focus for the whole college. How would you find out about how your direct reports feel about the collaboration they're engaged in or not engaged in? Take a look at these 5 questions on the slide and think about which of these you would want to use or could use to get data from your employees to inform you about their engagement in collaboration. So in other words, how do they feel about collaboration in their day-to-day? So there are 5 questions here. How are people you work with involved in changes in decision-making? Next, how are you and your colleagues encouraged to collaborate within your team and across teams? Again, pretty straightforward questions, but worth asking. How are roles assigned and coordinated to encourage collaboration? 4, how can your college or unit communicate more effectively with other departments? Again, big questions, but really worth asking, even one-on-one. How are team and individual goals communicated when working on a collaborative project? So there are your 5 questions. You'll notice that a lot of the question on the previous slide and this slide too, you see the word roles and kind of thinking about team responsibilities. If you want more ideas about how to get input from your team or about their roles, you could try the roles and responsibilities exercise, and you can find that on the 3rd page of the quick guide to clarifying roles and responsibilities. And I've uploaded that to Canvas today too in week 8. And I'll show that in just a minute. The questions that we looked at a minute ago that I hope you're still thinking about came from these two documents, and you can find these on our Canvas site. You can also find them at supervising.umn.edu. So the first one is the employee engagement drivers and self-reflection questions. That was actually the first one we did, or we looked at. And the second one, where you're having a discussion with your direct reports, is the employee engagement drivers and discussion questions. So for each of the drivers, for each of the conditions, the 10 conditions, there is a list of both discussion questions and self-reflection questions. This is a great starting point for you if this is something that, that's something that comes from your college as something that you are working on, or from your school that you're working on, or if it's just you as a supervisor, if this is an area that you want to become more familiar with and do some work in. Let's take a look ahead. Okay, let's shift a little bit. As I mentioned, this is the final session, our online session. We do have one final session at the beginning of April, and I'll show the date here in just a few minutes. At that session, we expect you to come prepared for this, project. And I put it in quotes because it's not like a typical college project. There's nothing to show us. There's nothing to hand in. I like to think of it as fairly informal because we are on a level playing field. You're all supervisors. You're all doing your best. You're all, you've all said to yourself, there's things I want to get better at. There's things I like what I'm doing. So it's a very level playing field, and it's a great chance for you to be very honest and open with other supervisors about what's working, what your plans are as you leave the course. So there's nothing you have to give us, and instead of feeling pressured to write that statement, I used to be an English teacher, so I really miss reading essays, but at the same time, I know that hopefully will take a lot of pressure off of you. I just want you to think about what you've learned in the course so far. You've been committed with us since the end of January, and I know a lot of you have struggled with finding time and, really being able to dive in, but fine, there's time. Don't worry, you don't have to do it all at once. But at this point, I want you to think about, how do you see yourself as a supervisor? And you can look at it through the lens of the topics we've talked about. But more importantly, how do you want to see yourself as a supervisor in the future? So at the final in-person session, you'll need to share your statement with the group. And the statement is not a written statement. It's not a piece of paper. It's up here, or maybe it's on note cards or whatever. You'll have about 5 or 7 minutes to talk about your statement. I would say be prepared for questions, because remember, this is a great time to learn from each other. We had some really rich discussions at our first in-person meeting, and I know a lot of you liked that and have asked for more of that. So this is, again, an opportunity for that. You don't need to hand in anything, like I said, but you're welcome to bring your talking points outlining your ideas. We will also at the session provide some time to think about your ideas during the session before sharing your ideas with the group. So in other words, you can kind of warm up and think, and it doesn't have to be all done as you walk in the door. It's just processing time between now and then. So supervisory statement, this is kind of, I like this visual because it shows equality. There's these 3 equal parts, equally important. The first one is reflections. What have you learned? And you can go back to your quizzes or to your applications or your discussion questions, and there's a lot of ideas in there. But what I'm really interested in, how have your ideas about supervisory evolved? And again, through the lens of the topics we've looked at, or other lenses too, whatever's important to you. And then, of course, when you leave our course, what ideas will you take with you? So that kind of leads into number 2, action. What are you going to do as a result of this course? What is it that you're going to commit to doing, and what impact do you hope to have as a result? That's a huge question, and maybe there's many, many, many answers that run through your mind. Just pick a couple. Think about your day-to-day. Don't be too ambitious. Be ambitious enough, but not too ambitious where you get overwhelmed. But just ask yourself, what's something I want to look at? What's something I want to work on? And I think a lot of you have looked at this already, so you should have lots of ideas for this, of things that make sense for you. Finally, perspectives on your ideal leadership presence. I love this one because it makes me think of mentorship and, people you admire, other supervisors, or just people you think about when you think about good leadership. This is, again, for you. It's very personal, but for you as a supervisor, what is your ideal leadership presence? This is wide open. There are lots of ways to be a leader. Think about what it looks like for you in your current circumstances. And for you personally, you are all kinds of supervisors. Just for you personally, there's no right or wrong. And again, also, where do you hope to be in the future? You can see that reflections, actions, and perspectives, they're all connected, but we just want to make sure you parse out a little bit of this so that we hear a little bit of all of this in your supervisory statement. And again, if you have any questions about the supervisory statement, you can email me anytime. Okay, good news coming up. There's no quiz this week. Yay! And there's also no discussion assignment. The reason for that is because we have finished our topics, our content topics. So if I were you, if you think, oh, I really wanted to do some work, great. Go back to that topic that you didn't have enough time for. Dig into the content a little bit. You can go back to our presentations. They're all posted on Canvas. You can rewatch parts. You can email me questions, anything you want to this week, next week, or the week after. But there's no quiz, there's no more quizzes, and there are no more discussions that are required. There is, however, of course, the Hogan debrief and the debriefs. I think you're all already scheduled. They should be in the next 2 weeks or so. For us, for our session, we'll be meeting on Tuesday, April 2nd at 12:15. We'll be meeting in Moose 15254. There will be lunch, so please come, if for nothing else, to share your supervisory statement, have a little bit of lunch, and to catch up with those colleagues that you may or may not have seen, really, or spent any quality time with since our first session. Thank you so much for your attention. I'm sorry I tried to keep this under 20 minutes, but it's 21. Sorry about that. If you have any questions at all, please email me anytime. I always like receiving your emails. If you're taking a vacation soon, have a great time and bring back some sunshine for us. Okay, see you all in a few weeks.